This is Granada Hills, a district located in the northern part of San Fernando Valley region of LA. And I lived here for quite a good portion of my life. However, most people that live here today have no clue this place once had a very interesting and thriving hospital. From the first to do open heart surgeries in the whole valley and a terminal illness program that helped house dying patients, which so happened to lead to a lot of paranormal activity. Then it also became a heroic place in a time of need and eventually went bankrupt in 2003 and completely shut down. Today, all that's left is a surgical center building tucked away in the corner of a large plaza on Devonshire and Balboa Boulevard. And the main building is still left, which is now owned by the LAUSD after they took down the rest of the hospital to build a parking structure for a high school. And it kind of makes sense why I didn't tear this part down, because it's also where most of the death happened, and the structure just gives off some eerie vibes that look straight out the 60s. But let's understand why this is a forgotten historical building in the valley and go back to the very beginning to learn what happened. Backstories, ladies and gentlemen. So in 1961, the North Valley Investment Company started building hospitals around the whole valley, and they funded a $1 million project to build a Granada Hills Community Hospital, which would be 3 stories tall and house 50 beds with 24-hour emergency service.
Offering a complete continuum of geriatric medical and social services, including the unique socialization and support program, the Care Club.
The hospital would open in 1965 and eventually expand with the additional sector, giving it 145 beds, including 16 obstetrical beds, an 18-bed critical care unit, and a 14-bed psychiatric unit, and would keep growing to reach well over 200 beds. At the time, it was a top-of-the-line hospital in a growing community, and in 1979, it became the primary base for a new program called the Symptom Control Program. And that was to care for physical, emotional, and mental needs of dying patients, which to me sounds a lot like hospitals, and I would think they did it bring that insurance money in, because in the medical field, dying patient care is a big money thing. But it did also introduce the CARE program, which is the Center of Aging Research and Evaluation.
By Granada Hills Community Hospital is CARE, the Center for Aging Research and Evaluation, offering a complete continuum of geriatric medical and social services.
Around the same time, they were also the first hospital in the valley to do open heart laser surgeries, and this would be the very building still standing here today. And very quickly thereafter, the hospital became a death house of sorts, and by 1986 had the highest mortality rate of any hospital in the valley and 5th highest in California. And it was mostly because they housed terminally ill patients, which a spokesperson told the LA Times, quote, "If the program is designed to treat terminal illness, people die. This is the reality of the program," quote. And for the most part, they really helped these people live out their last days. Unless it's just for the cameras.
But they're not yet ready for the traditional adult daycare. They're individuals who can do most things on their own, but they just need a supervised and really supportive environment. By coming here, they realize that they're not alone. There are other people that are in the same situation, and that they're really okay.
And in this report right here, it says by 1987, there was 378 cancer deaths, 468 cerebrovascular accidental deaths, which is basically a stroke, and 558 renal deaths, which is like kidney failure. Now, these people were on their way out of life as it is, but the mortality was above average and combined to 8.3% of patients dying, which is like 3% higher than the predicted death rate they had of 5.3% in surrounding hospitals. This would eventually lead to a heavy paranormal activity where nurses and patients would report objects being yanked and thrown across the room, spirits reportedly confronting the dead before they pass, and everything.
Overnight nurses frequently witnessed glowing apparitions floating down the corridors of the hospice unit, while others reported having their clipboards jerked from their hands as if by an invisible force. Perhaps most amazing of all were reports from dying patients who claimed that they were visited at bedside by spectral figures that seemed to reach out and touch them in a comforting manner.
Yeah, I sure wouldn't want to work that night shift. But I'm sure a lot of hospitals today experience the same thing as well. And eventually, one paranormal investigator in 1988 would actually go in there and catch a live apparition on camera in one of the most haunted and terminally ill rooms as shown here.
Now here's the footage. You can see the face clearly. This has been enhanced, color dropped out. You'll see how the image fades away. And then very slowly but surely it starts to reappear, but not everywhere at once. It starts to appear here at the head, goes away again, comes back, and then you can actually see the torso appear down here.
What's going on here? Is that real?
Pretty much a very fuzzy but very normally distributed human face. And in one frame, it goes to something that looks much more appearance-wise like some kind of monster or skull with these big roundish dark orbits to the eyes. The nose actually appears to be shorter. There seems to be some kind of frown in here and a mouth here. The cheekbone shape has even changed, and if you notice that the jowls have diminished, and you're just starting to see down here the hint of some kind of body. Now I'm going to go back to the previous frame again, and you'll see. I mean, it's like it's almost as though it's two different images entirely.
Now this is like 88, so the technology wasn't that great. But this guy was like a professional pixel editor before its time, and honestly, what he rendered after from that footage looks more clear than a lot of ghosts caught in 4K. After this event, the hospital banned paranormal investigators and staff from talking about it because I would assume they didn't want any bad press.
Unfortunately, the identity of this lost soul may never be known, since the hospital no longer allows paranormal researchers inside.
Jesus, what an ugly ghost. The main word came from the man in charge, president and chief of the hospital, Richard Gold, who was quite a character and raised the popularity of the hospital because he loved the cameras.
Promise us right now,
there were nearly as many cameras.
And before doing this research, I didn't even know a hospital has such a thing as a president. He even allowed filming for a TV show there called The Scarecrow and Miss King.
Our doctors suturing people, it looked like a literal war zone. It was a MASH unit, and there were people lined up on all sides of the hallway.
Yeah, imagine driving any of those cars today. And Gold ran the hospital like a general, and his heroics would show on January 17th, 1994 on MLK Day.
that is correct. We have a patient who has second-degree burns and third-degree burns from their waist down and first-degree burns of their face. We need to get this patient transferred to Sherman Oaks Burn Unit, and we have authority or the ability for Sherman Oaks to accept that patient. We now need emergency transportation vehicle to be able to transport that patient, and that's an immediate need we would appreciate right away.
The 6.7 Northridge earthquake would hit Los Angeles and rock it like never before. The whole city was shook, and especially Granada Hills, which is only a few blocks from the epicenter.
When the violent shaking
And
subsided,
the damage was so
terrified
bad that
victims
most of
staggered
Granada
out of their
Hills
homes
was
to
about
fight incredible
water,
devastation.
gas, and power.
18 minutes after the hour, Granada Hills was one of the hardest hit communities in yesterday's quake, and the local hospital went into
Out of all
overdrive.
37 hospitals in the valley, the Granada Hills Community Hospital was the only place operating at full capacity to save lives that morning, even after the water tank would break and fall through a roof, causing a huge water leak.
The first things that we had to deal with was a 2,500-gallon water tank that feeds our sprinkler system ruptured on the roof, sending 2,500 gallons of water into our third and second floors, all the way down, flooding our emergency room. So the first thing we had to do was evacuate approximately 50 patients from the second and third floors in the dark through the stairwells down to our lobby.
Strong aftershocks would come all day. Gold had his staff working around the clock and saving lives.
What have you learned from this experience?
I've learned that our crew has incredible spirit, and again, one of the things we did learn was that moving our triage area to the parking lot outside the hospital worked as a tremendous control system for us and allowed for us to be extremely efficient and extremely organized.
And with the hospital being at capacity, they took over 700 patients, which is almost 5 times the beds they had, and they improvised by making room in the basement and outside the hospital.
Coming to the hospital, it was really quite chaotic. There were people running all over the place. I entered through the side door and saw a sea of patients in the lobby. There were at least 50 patients just in wheelchairs and in mattresses all over the lobby. I walked directly to the emergency room and intercepted the hallway, which was a laceration center, which had people holding flashlights and our doctors suturing people. It looked like a literal war zone. It was a MASH unit, and there were people lined up on all sides of the hallway. We saw over 700 patients in the first 3 days and over 1,000 patients in the first week. Being the only hospital in the San Fernando Valley.
It was a scene of chaos straight out of a movie, right outside the hospital, and Gold would be the man on the front line commanding and improvising.
Okay, great. How many people have we seen come through here? Chuck, if you could just pan around and show some of the folks. The parking lot is still set up here like a triage center. What have we been looking at today here?
We've received at least 10 admissions so far. We have about 3 dozen patients that have been seen in triage already, and another, I would say, at least 4 to 5 dozen patients in our parking lot. We are taking them on a priority basis due to level of injury.
So we're pretty much close to saturation point.
We are close to saturation point, especially the paramedics, and that is our biggest concern is for the emergent patients.
And it even got so crazy, they even used the news choppers to lift people to the hospital.
To the gentleman you were speaking to earlier and see if perhaps we can provide helicopter service or help in some way.
Well, we'll find out live right now. Interruption quick. Can we provide helicopter service in any way to get that man out of here for you?
That would be very helpful. We're trying to see right now if we can get that patient ready to go and even put him in a car, so a helicopter would be fantastic. I do know that Sherman Oaks has a heliport, so if you've got somebody who can get here and land, we'd be more than happy to transport.
How do we communicate with it?
How do you communicate?
Yeah, can you give us the frequencies for the helicopter and all that on your roof?
Well, we don't have a roof access to drop down on. They'd have to come to the parking lot. We have to clear a space out here and drop the helicopter down right here in our parking lot.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, thanks.
That's crazy. CBS News live on air allowing their chopper for airlift transport. That's a once-in-a-lifetime thing we might never see again, and hopefully not. Were they doing that for 9/11? Katrina? I don't know. Also, right next door to the hospital was a Kaiser Permanente building, which would completely collapse.
Because we saw those pictures yesterday, that Kaiser Permanente building, which is right next door to your hospital, that had just collapsed on itself.
And thankfully, no one was seriously injured at the Kaiser because it was a holiday and the earthquake happened early in the morning. Had it been a regular day, there would have been a lot of casualties for sure.
Sean's first job was to turn off the gas main at the collapsed building next door.
I get over there, the gas is going through the meter unregulated. I mean, completely pouring through. It's so close to my building that if anything happens to it, it happens to me.
And this Kaiser site would eventually become a high school, and I'm sure all the kids know nothing about it. Media from all over the country came to document the hospital's heroics that day. Until this day, I still think they should make a movie about the whole thing.
You hanging in there? Well, I think initially the staff had levels of adrenaline that were sky high, and we were just too busy to think about our own problems. Right now, as things have tapered off, people are beginning to realize that that this is a major disaster, and it's starting to take its toll on our staff. We now have a team of psychologists and psychiatrists who are helping not only the people in the community, but also the staff.
I've learned that I have an incredible staff of nurses who I know can handle
Notice he
any
said
challenge.
they needed a whole team of psychiatrists for the staff alone. So you know they saw some crazy that day. I'm sure they still dream about it to this very day. And it's even said that Richard Gold's house was in ruins.
The dedication of those at Granada Hills Community Hospital has been appreciated not only by the patients,
just what we need. Yep. Thank you so much.
but also by the staff members trying to put personal and professional lives back in order.
Wait. Is that a dead body just laying there in the corner, feet up? Did the camera just start zooming in when they noticed? Definitely looks like an earthquake casualty accidentally caught on the news. And since the earthquake, hospital funding was never the same. By 2003, only 53 patients were being taken care of after a judge ordered to wind down operations because the hospital was going bankrupt. Around the same time, I myself moved to Granada Hills, where I remember actually briefly going inside the hospital with my mom, and they wouldn't take her insurance, so we just left. It was quick and I was young, but I do remember having an old school vibe of despair, and honestly, it didn't feel like a hospital at all because the staff was short, and that was due to layoffs. And only a few months later, the hospital would actually be completely shut down. Then in 2004, LAUSD outbid 13 other bidders in a 5-0 vote from the city itself to build a high school, even though there was already 2 major high schools within a mile of the location. And the Asian community held whole rallies to reopen the hospital because they needed health care more than another school, which made sense. But the LAUSD would secure the property for $22.5 million in 2006. And then the LAUSD demolished some of the hospital to start work on the school. It took them over 5 years to build, and they converted part of the hospital they tore down into the school parking lot, which I remember at the time a lot of kids would break into the construction site to smoke and tag, because construction was always delayed and wasn't really secure that good. And I'm talking from first-hand experience. Eventually in 2011, the 1,200 capacity student school was completed partly over the Kaiser site and a parking structure on the hospital site which connect to the school. So if I had to guess about any haunted parking lots, I'll bet the house, that parking structure is up there. And I'm sure some of the students and staff could attest to it. And if you happen to be one of them, please comment below. I would highly appreciate it. The school, however, never tore down the surgical building, where it also kept the terminally ill, and I wonder why. Even though I think they made the right choice, because the energy surrounding the building and it looks all kind of like a storage of sorts today. The building still sits here forgotten, looking really creepy on a corner. I'm sure most people drive by this busy Balboa Devonshire intersection every day, and they don't even notice what's hidden in the corner. I also briefly remember they had an MRI office running here a few years after the closure of the hospital, and eventually that stopped, and there's no information about it. And as far as people still using the building, sometimes at night you can come here and see the basement line on, so who knows what they're doing in there. But if you type in Granada Hills Medical Surgical Center, it shows up on Google as a fully operating business, but it's clearly not. And it's so weird that it gives off that Men in Black headquarters type of vibe, like there's something going on down there in the basement. And they even boarded up most of the basement windows. Maybe one day this will be more than just reminiscence of an old hospital tucked away in a corner, but the energy of what happened here remains, and probably will remain because energy doesn't die, it just transfers.
I want to personally thank every employee, physician, volunteer, and foundation member for their time, their commitment, their dedication, and their spirit to this family and to this hospital. Without you, getting through this traumatic experience could not have been possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and God bless. And if you have any other stories about this place, please comment below, because I would love to hear about them. And if you like this type of content, I'll be doing a lot more videos to come in other locations around the whole California and eventually everywhere if this channel goes big. So keep a lookout for the next episode and subscribe. It's been a pleasure. Backstories.